What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the Fantasy Puck Podcast, episode 2. I'm your host, Mike, and with me today is my co-host, Chris, better known as Clarky. How are you today, man?
I'm doing great, Mike. How are you doing?
You know what? I'm not doing as good as I usually am because of all this technical issues we've just run into.
Man,
But
guys, we're not even kidding. We probably have tried to record this podcast, I'd say like 9 or 10 times, and there has been either an audio issue, a video issue, a recording issue, a camera. Like the list has gone on and on. So if you guys are somehow hearing this episode, it means we somehow figured all this out within the last like 5 minutes of us needing to record.
we're hockey guys. We're not studio guys. That's my only excuse for this. But we're here. We're excited. Clarky, I think you have a little agenda for what we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah, so some topics that I think that we just want to cover week 2. I'm just going to skim over a couple things, and then we can kind of deep dive a little bit into it. We're going to try and keep it within an hour this time, guys. I know our first pilot episode kind of went a little bit longer, but we did get to evaluating some of your guys' teams, and we are going to take some of your questions. So shout out to everybody who posted a topic or posted some kind of question in our Discord. And if you're watching this on YouTube and you're not in our Discord, there should be a link in the description. Definitely go join, and we'll be more than happy to address all your fantasy hockey news for this season. But getting into the agenda today, we have just a couple bullet points here that I think we should cover. Don't panic on players this early. Just some I told you so's and some way off players that we kind of like evaluated early on. We want to give a special shout out to Data Draft, who we will cover in a little bit, and hopefully get him on the podcast sooner than later. Some hot and slow starts around the league, some of our favorite risers and buy lows, and then just a nice little fun question. I wanted to see what Mike's top 3 reverse retro jerseys are. I'll give my opinion as well, and then we'll answer some of your guys' questions to kind of finish off the pod. So, Mike, I think like week 2, a lot of people we've seen, especially like early on, I get the sense a lot of people are like really panicked about like certain, like looking at their team, maybe like looking at a certain position where they're like, oh, like I'm really worried about my defense, for example, or I'm really worried about my goaltending. What advice would you give, especially like this early on in the season, to those guys that are looking at their teams and may not be 100% confident in where they're at?
You know, I just think when you draft a player, you draft them for a reason. And especially guys that you're taking early. I think one guy that people have been panicking a lot on is Timo Meier. Like, this guy was a beast last year. You took him in the 3rd round. You shouldn't even be considered dropping him. And if you're selling him out now, you're selling him at his lowest point. I guess my advice is we're only 5 games into the season and there's still 77 games left. So there's so much time to rebound. And, another player that comes to mind for me is Kevin Fiala. And I know you don't like talking about him very much, but he's a guy that people panicked on so much last year. And historically, he's such a good second half player. And that's what we saw out of him last year. So you kind of got to stay true to your players, know who you drafted and why you drafted them, and just hold for the long run. Don't panic. Don't sell low. If anything, you want to be selling high on some of the players that you drafted late and that are way overperforming. And I'm sure we'll touch on some of those players in a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah, one of the guys that like I've heard some questions and some just kind of like attention around is Roman Josi, for example.
Yeah.
Just because he has 1 point in his first 7 games, and it's an assist, not even on the power play. So obviously, coming off of like a 96-point season and going to having 1 point in his first 7 games is not ideal. But I think like you said, like it's really important to understand like why we drafted these players in the first place. Like Roman Josi is an elite defenseman because of his shot volume. Like he's had 2 games already where he's posted 7 shots, right?
I think he had 9 last game too. I have his numbers up here too, if I can jump in quickly.
He played 29 minutes last game.
Yeah.
Like that is absurd.
And they lost?
Yeah, they lost 3-1 to Philly because Philly's the best team in the NHL.
I don't want to talk about that.
It's Carter Hart season, baby. I'm telling you.
Yeah.
But yeah, so guys, like it's important to just like be confident in the player that you drafted. Like Timo Meier, I think is a great example. Like he is leading the NHL in negative expected goals for. The inverse of expected goals.
He's always unlucky.
Yes.
0% shooting percentage on 29 shots this season.
Yeah, that is absolutely ridiculous. I'm going to bring it up here really quickly because lowest goals above expected. He is minus 2.8 goals above expected, which essentially means that he has been expected to score essentially 3 goals at this point, and he just hasn't. Other notable players on that list, number 2 is Austin Matthews at minus 2.2. And
His
then
goal was
Roman
barely a
Josi,
goal, too.
You're not wrong. Roman Josi is also on that list at minus 2, as well as notable busts Jack Hughes.
We'll get into that.
Clearly just not a 90-point player. Guy's terrible. New Jersey's awful. Yeah, okay. I think this is a good transition to get into some players that were like, I told you so, and that we were kind of bang on with, and then some players that we were not necessarily 100% correct in just where we were evaluating them. Does anybody really like jump out to you early on, or?
I think bang on is not the best word to use here, because we are only 5 to 7 games into the season, so a lot can happen. But I think the big standout, and he's on your list and he's on mine too, Vincent Trocheck, man, he has been an absolute stud early on. And when I made projections for him, we obviously put our own bias in the projections, and we have a multiplier for accounting for players that are in a better position than they were last year or a worse position, and it'll adjust their rates based on that. And for Trocheck, we gave him a 1.2 multiple from last year. It really, really bumped his projection up. And we had him in, like, I think the top 50 for some leagues. And I took him as early as 75, which is almost 175 spots earlier than he should have went in terms of his ADP. But he has been producing so well for me. I have him in 4 of my 6 leagues. And, I saw him on the free agency in some people's leagues in the Discord. I hope they added him, but yeah, he's been really good. His minutes are up quite a bit. He's sitting at over 20 minutes, and I readjusted his projections for the new minutes, because we only projected him for 18 minutes this year, because we didn't know, right? I think Ryan Strome was around that.
In the last 2 games, he's played over 21 minutes. Yeah,
especially when there's a lot of special teams. And that was another reason why we liked him, because of how good that top power play unit was. And he's been so good this season. I mean, the Rangers are on another level right now. And something I brought up a few times is I kept Barkov over Zibanejad in a league.
No, that's tough.
But it's like no now. But
yes,
in the preseason, we had him ranked as our, I think, 11th ranked player, our 8th best skater, Barkov, and Zibanejad was down at like 20. And I don't know. I didn't think the Rangers were going to be this hot of a start, but it looks like Zib's been picking it up. But yeah, Trocheck, really good.
Yeah, 6 points in his first 5 games, 20 shots. So he's averaging 5 shots on goal per game, which is like insane, because Trocheck's typically known as like more of a two-way player. And like we saw that in Carolina as well. But like, yeah, like just the exposure to Panarin and the fact that he's getting that power play one time has just been like so beneficial for him. He plays kind of like that net front bumper spot almost. And the race has just been like incredible out of the gate. And yeah, that's like, you're 100% right. Like Zibs got off to a scorching hot start. But it's like Florida is more than capable of, especially Barkov, a guy that's like all they have to do is like juggle their lines a little bit and like stack that top line again, and it's completely different, right? So, yeah, I like bang on, I guess, isn't the term that I was trying to get at. More so that like we guys that were on our radar that we were recommending that you guys especially grab in your drafts. I was able to get Trocheck at 97, which I thought was like that's early round 9. Like that's just perfect for me, and he's pretty much playing like a number 1, number 2 center for me in my leagues. Marty Necas, my boy. I know you think it's Necas, and it could honestly be Necas, but I've heard so many announcers pronounce him Necas, so I'm going with Necas. You guys can flame me or just tell me that I'm outright wrong.
Sounding it out.
He's had a hot start as well, and he was somebody that I told you guys that were able to get like deep in your drafts, like within your last couple picks. I was able to get him round 15 at ADP 169.
Wow.
Yeah, so really, really deep in my draft. And he's just had a fantastic start playing with Svechnikov, and Jesperi Kotkaniemi's also gotten in on that. Not as much as Necas has, but and again, like he's got 7 points in his first 5 games. Like a super hot start, shooting the puck at a decent rate too. Like he's not really known for his shot volume.
No.
But just like hot start in a points league, right? Especially from a guy that you could very well sell high on going forward.
I think he's definitely a sell high. And I'm looking here. So in terms of total time on ice to start the season for the Hurricanes, he is first amongst forwards with 4 more minutes played than Aho, which is very surprising. He played 23 minutes last game I saw, which was very intriguing. So they must like what they see out of him right now. He's off to a very good start. He's definitely a sell high candidate. For me anyways.
All right. So, anybody that like you feel that we were super high on and just hasn't really like swung out of the gate like we anticipated? I think like Jack Hughes is a name that really comes to mind, but like we can talk about the Devils and their Corsi and analytics and everything like that. But
it's crazy, man.
like
Moritz Seider.
Moritz Seider is a big one, and like this kind of goes back to the Yossi conversation, and I think that you mentioned that like he's not seeing power play one time.
Yeah.
As well too. And like I'm honestly like not even worried about that. Like that doesn't really change my outlook on Seider. Again, like you're drafting Seider because this guy hits every peripheral category at such an elite level. And even though like the production's not necessarily what it was to start last year, or he's not necessarily getting power play one time, like I'm confident that Detroit will go back to him on power play one. I'm confident that the points will start to flow in from the Detroit team in general, because they've been kind of slow out of the gate as well too. Like a couple of those players like Raymond is one that we've kind of been keeping an eye on. But I still am just as high on Seider, and I honestly consider him to be a buy low.
Yeah, there's a lot going on in that Red Wings team too with Vrana's leave of absence, and I don't know if we want to really touch on that, but he's out for a little bit. Bertuzzi's out 4 to 6 weeks now as well. They have a lot of new faces too, and people don't understand that there's a chemistry factor. Like, yeah, it's good names and it's big names, but it's like they've never played with these players before, and there's a lot of chemistry that needs to be built up. So I think Detroit's going to be a better second half team than what we're seeing right now, but they've only played 4 games, so they are lagging behind in the league right now a little bit. I think it's fine. I'm still staying true to Seider, and like you said, you didn't draft him for a 60-point player. You drafted him because he's gonna, like, pretty much like a Jacob Trouba, like a better Trouba is what you're drafting him for. And in some leagues, Trouba, I was just looking the other day, I'm like trying to trade for a defenseman in one of my leagues. We have blocks, hits, shots, all of that, and Trouba is ranked 23 right now. And
yeah, I'm shocked at how much he's shooting the puck, actually.
Yeah, he's been really good. So I don't think there's any panic here on Seider. He's a buy low, if anything. We're going to be posting our buy low, sell high this week. So you're probably going to see his name on there for good reason. But, you know, in terms of Lucas Raymond, and I'm seeing people wanting to drop him, I think that's just a big panic. His minutes are up +2 this year. He's power play 1. He's playing the top 6. Yeah, he's not playing with Larkin right now, but I don't think there's any cause for concern. I mean, they have 2 wingers that are out right now, and he's a winger, so he's only going to get better, only going to play more minutes because of it. I don't think there's much panic, but he has actually been my worst performer in the fantasy puck league at 1.8 points. he has in 4 games, he has no points, 1 shot, that was this week. He had no points, 1 shot, and 1 hit. And yeah, it just hasn't been very good. Him and Demko, oh man, Demko. It's hurt me. I'm holding him. I don't care.
Yeah, you have to. I just think like I'll touch on Vancouver quickly, but like I think that like you kind of just get to a point where you're able to ride off of momentum, and that's exactly what happened to the latter half of last year. Like when they had the coaching change and Bruce Boudreau came in, and he was able to kind of like re-energize that team. Like you're just riding momentum at that point. Like that doesn't necessarily mean that your team is going to be successful in the long run, because if you think about it, the only people they really brought in was like Kuzmenko, and they didn't really change the makeup of their team. So like to me, like over the large sample of the kind of wave that the Canucks have been on, like I still think they're a bad team.
Yeah.
Like I still think they have issues they need to address, especially defensively. And so, like it's just very possible for teams to just ride waves like that too, where, like, and we talked about Pettersson being like a buy low last year, for example. Like, look at him now. Like, this guy is trying to put the Canucks on his back. Like, he's playing out of his mind right now. So good on Petty, and he was a high risk, high reward keeper for me for that specific reason. He's also dual eligible now, which I didn't know.
Oh wow,
he's
that's
left
interesting.
wing center, which is like actually adds a whole nother element to it. But I want to take over one more person that I was like somebody like Okay, yes, like I told you. So like um I made a video. It wasn't specifically on Darlene, but he was my like breakout defenseman candidate, and like it was kind of like an odd pick because of the fact that like he already had a season where like he broke out essentially the year before. Like
56 points.
yeah, he had a great year the year before, and I'm just like, man, like this guy can reach a higher level. Like there was so much hype around Owen Power. There was so much like him being the number one pick. I'm just like, man, like Darlene's still seeing power play one time. Like this guy's an incredible talent. Like this guy could go off, and he ends up setting an NHL record. He actually now holds the record
Yeah, he
for
broke it. Yeah.
the only defenseman in National Hockey League history to score in each of his first 5 games. So I actually have him in my FP league, and yeah, I'm happy that that one ended up playing out because like I just saw that this guy's just too skilled. It's similar to Nietzsche's, right? Like you see all these incredibly skilled players that you're like, this guy could hit another level, and thankfully I was right.
Darlene was that. Yeah. So I actually didn't draft him in any of my leagues, but I did take him for Norris at plus 5,000.
Good for you.
And I guess now that we're on the topic of sport betting, the other one I'm a little bit proud of, but I don't know if it's going to hit, is I took Kalen Addison at plus 10,000 for Calder, and he is now down to plus 900 after 6 assists in 4 games. And you know, it's interesting with what's going on with Addison right now. I was watching that Bruins Minnesota game. I'm not sure if you caught any of it, but so it went to overtime, and in 3-on-3 they started off Kaprizov, Zuccarello, and Addison was the 3. Now they did run into penalty trouble in overtime and ultimately lost because of it. So it could have just been like Brodin, Dumba, Spurgeon were penalty killing, and obviously Addison doesn't, and that's why he was on. But I mean, he does have a power play assist in overtime before. So, I mean, they're giving him all the offensive looks right now. He's pretty interesting, but I'm not sure if we really talked about him in any of the videos. He was in my Deep League Sleepers video. That was the only one I really talked about him in. So hopefully some people grabbed him there. I don't own him in any leagues. Just I have really stacked up on defense in most of my leagues. That was more of my strategy this season more than any, especially that like 100 plus range. There's so many good defensemen.
Yeah, I remember seeing a tweet from Don Lecision, who is a writer for The Athletic, and his tweet was literally like, run, don't walk, to pick up Kalen Addison right now in fantasy. And then I was able to get him in a couple of the deeper leagues. But yeah, like he's just been seeing that power play one time, and like you pair him with guys like Kaprizov and Boldy, especially, who I think is like proven that like he's just not a fluke playing with Fiala, like he's the real deal as a prospect. And
is Minnesota a fluke though?
Minnesota might be a fluke.
What's going on?
Well, I think that you lost a lot of scoring with Fiala first and foremost. And then, like, Fleury is just, like, Fleury was on my... I never made a video on it, but he was on, like, my must-avoid goalies. Because, like, if you look at his history in the amount of games that he starts in comparison to what his save percentage is, you'll see that he hits this point where if he starts over 35, 40 games... his save percentage drastically drops.
Jack Campbell.
And so, again, literally. And that in correlation with just the age curve coming into effect, like, I was just super as soon as they traded Campbell, Talbot, excuse me, I was super hesitant to pick him because, like, I just thought, like, man, like, he's just going to see way too much volume way too early on, and it's going to be difficult for him to get back into playing that huge workload. Especially at his age. So I think that was just somebody that I was avoiding.
Sorry to cut you off. I think the big thing for me was Minnesota was a 50-win team last year and super impressive. Not many teams can do that. And I went to look at the goaltending stats, and I'm like, how good was Talbot last year? Because Ottawa fans were really hyped to get him. And I went and looked, and both him and Kakkonen were above 2.8 goals against average. They were below league average in terms of goals against average. Save percentage, same thing. So Minnesota was winning last year on their offense, high scoring games, which is what we're seeing this year. So when I was talking about why I don't like Fleury, the main reason was Minnesota wasn't a good defensive team. Although they had 50 wins, they weren't a good defensive team. Similar to the Leafs, where they are a good defensive team now, right? And they're more structured, and you can see it translate to their goalie stats. But when I looked at the Minnesota goalie stats, I'm like, Talbot was below league average other than having a lot of wins. So that was my concern with Fleury. I mean, I watched that Boston game and he looked really good. But if we want to talk about someone that's looked really, really good in the early going, David Pastrnak. Oh my God. Like, and so my first draft of the season, I had third overall and I took Leon Draisaitl, and then I went. I mean, I think I was live streaming this. I think everyone that was there to watch it, we had decent viewing, but I ended up going Draisaitl and then Yossi and then Pastrnak, and I am lighting that league up right now. This guy has been an absolute like he was calling for the puck after a full 2-minute shift. He's like, give me the puck. I need to shoot it on net. Like he has been very, very good this year. He's been one of my best performers, I would say, in terms of like all my fantasy teams. He's ranked 3 in one of my leagues, but I'm pulling up stats right now.
10 points, 37 shots, like just an absolute shot volume machine. And unfortunately, I have him in this ridiculous 17 team parlay or 17 player parlay where it's over under goals for each player. It pays something ridiculous, like $700,000. I'm not obviously going to win just because like the likelihood of that happening is like 0%. But I took him for the under 40. So over under 40 goals. I took him for the under 40. I just thought like with Marchand being
might
out,
get hurt. We never know.
Yeah, I just like I wasn't 100% on it, but man, he looks unbelievable, and I'm already regretting that bet. Like just the shot volume alone like warrants his pick, and if you were able to get him, Yossi, and Draisaitl in your first 3 picks, like I'm not surprised that you're absolutely dominating.
Yeah, my team's very unfair. Go ahead. Sorry.
Speaking of dominating, I just wanted to quickly transition. How are you doing in your leagues just as like a whole?
Yeah.
Anything and specific that you want to touch on? I know we're in one league together. Maybe just touch on the FP league or anything else, couple higher tier buy-ins, whatever you want to go over.
Yep. So my first week, I ended up going 4-2. And this is my excuse for the 2 losses. So I had Francouz and Binnington for my goalies in one of the leagues. And St. Louis, they only played like 1 game in the week, and Francouz only had 1 start. So I didn't get my minimum goalie starts. And I'm looking down my roster. I'm like, do I drop Seth Jarvis and stream a goalie this week to match my starts and potentially win? Or do I just take the L, hold my goalies, and hold Jarvis? And I just decided to take the L. And, you know, that's my excuse for losing. But yeah, I did win 4 my first week. And now this week right now, I'm doing very well, 6-1. 5-1, and we were recording this at 4:30 p.m. on Sunday. So I don't know if I'm going to end up losing, but my big league where I didn't have a first, third, fifth, or sixth round pick, I'm surprisingly winning this week. And if I open up my team, I mean, I haven't really checked who's done very good for me this week. Brady Tkachuk, it's a keeper league. Yeah, he's just been insane. But yeah, it's been like pretty evened out. Ghost Despair has been good. Feovari, Tarasenko. My goalies, Kemper, Merzlikins have been fine. But I think one of my best performers so far has been Jake Ottinger, actually.
Yeah, I don't think that's really a surprise. The one thing with Otter was just like the lack of sample size for him. And he was somebody that was obviously had a higher ADP as a goalie in most drafts, just depending on your goalie stats especially. And Dallas under Pete DeBoer just seems to have a more like flowing offense and transition game. So Otter looks like he's the real deal at this point. Like I'm not surprised at that point. I like a lot of the time these young goalies like him, like Demko especially, and I'm gonna throw. I'm in a similar situation right now where I'm in a keeper league. And I didn't have a pick until round 9. Like really went all in last year.
Did you win?
I did not. So my team was like criminally injured. Like I had Leonard, I had Patches, I had just like Batherson as well. Just a boatload of injuries on my team as I was coming into fantasy playoffs. So I ended up taking the L in that one. Finished in the top 6, which I guess is like it's not that big of a deal. But so I'm in rebuild mode right now. And the way that my league works is like every 3 years, the keepers get reset essentially. So you can keep a player for essentially up to 3 years. It's kind of like contract based, similar to the NHL. So that's kind of cool. But upcoming draft next year is with the McDavid, the Matthews, Drysdale. So it's the big draft.
Also, they're going to be in the draft next year.
Yes. So
What if they get
all of
traded?
the even if they get traded, they still only have 1 year left on their contract. So even though so say if you held Matthews for 2 years, for example, and this was his last year, even if you moved him to a different team, he still only had 1 year left of eligibility.
Oh, okay.
So he goes back into the draft essentially. And so I've just went through a full kind of rebuild. I ended up trading Sebastian Aho, who's 1 year left on his deal, for Jack Hughes and an upgrade in picks. I know, just terrible. But I have some good complementary pieces. I got Trocheck in that league. Lafreniere has been solid out of the gate. Kuzmenko, who we'll touch on a little bit later. I ended up getting Nietzsche and Jarvis as well. And Yossi, Aho, who were my other 2 keepers? John Tavares
been good.
Adam Fox. So I ended up moving Tavares and Fox for draft picks in preparation for next year.
Smart.
But yeah, a pretty lackluster team. But one of the big pickups that I had off of waivers, and this is somebody that I thought was a coin flip.
Can I guess?
Was Carter Hart.
Oh, I was gonna say Raquel.
I spoiled it for you already. Raquel would have been good to have too.
Don't get me started with Hart. Don't get me started.
I have Carter Hart, and he is just on an absolute tear in Philadelphia right now. 949 save percentage, 4 wins. He hasn't lost a game. He hasn't let in more than 2 goals as a goaltender in each of his 4 starts. He is now 74% owned across leagues. And I made the mistake of moving Jacob Markstrom early on last year, within the first 2 months, and I was selling high on him. I'm pretty sure I talked to you about it because I was trying to get your advice on players and stuff. I ended up trading him for Nylander, Heischer, and Batherson, which definitely bolstered my offense. But goalies are just so valuable in this league, especially in a keeper league, that I ended up really biting the bullet.
17 team keeper league. Is that what it is?
No. It's 12. It's 12 team.
Okay.
12 team keep 4. But there is 4 goalie categories. This is the league where we play with face-off wins as well. But yeah, so I was I'm super hesitant to move any goalies just because of how volatile they are, especially. And you get Markstrom's a top 5 goalie in this league just because of the volume that he gets and how good Calgary is. I put $25 down that Markstrom will win the Vezina this year, actually, as a future, and I think it pays $5.25 or something. And they're already cashing me out at 40 already to begin with. So hopefully that continues. But Carter Hart, super excited that I got him off waivers, and hopefully that continues. I don't know if Philly's going to continue to win, but if Hart can kind of stay close to a 9-10 save percentage, I'll be very happy with that.
So we have a term in baseball, me and Don, called a Donnie sleeper, which is a player that you're very high on that completely busts the year you're high on him, and you don't draft him next year because he doesn't do well for you, and then he goes off next year. If you go back to 2020 and 2021 on Fantasy Puck's YouTube channel, you will see I loved Carter Hart. And this year I said, nope, I'm not touching him with a 10-foot pole. And now look what happens. That is the definition of a Donnie sleeper. It is the best example of a Donnie sleeper. I didn't even sniff Hart in any of my drafts, and he was going late for a starter. He was actually being undrafted as a starting goaltender. And now this guy is a 940 save percentage. I think Philly's a complete fluke. So we'll see what happens. They have no skill on their team. They I don't know. I feel like near the end of the season, or maybe halfway through the season, they're going to really struggle. They have no experience. They have really no veteran presence. They are very young. They have a lot of rookies like Frost, Zamula, I think his name is, Zagmula. I don't know, Scott Lawton's their second line center. I feel like they're going to run into trouble eventually. They're going to come back down to earth.
No, you look at that team from top down, we anticipated them to be a dumpster fire, which is why Hart didn't Hart didn't get drafted. But if there's one thing that Torts does harder. If there's one thing that Torts does really well, is he's able to squeeze blood out of a stone. That's the analogy that I've heard. So, like, it doesn't surprise me that Philly's a very good, like, defensive-minded, like, team, defense-oriented team. But I agree. Like, I think they're going to come back down to earth. I'm just too scared to trade this goalie away if things don't change, because that's what I thought about Calgary last year.
Yeah.
Obviously, two completely different teams in comparison, like, just looking at the teams side by side. But Carter Hart could be a nice little sell high. I'm just waiting for him to get a little bit more sample size. That way I can truly kind of value him. But speaking of goaltenders, I want to give a huge shout out to Data Draft for using our video in his most recent kind of goalie debacle where his fantasy hockey season is going. He talked about the one goalie strategy, which you made a video on, or one team goalie strategy, excuse me, which you made a video on, and how we're just able to find these like backups on really, really good teams and utilize them. I don't want to spoil the video. It's an incredible detail. Like, just go check out his channel. His content's unbelievable. We're going to try and get him on the podcast very, very soon for you guys, just to, like, kind of create more discussion and talk about the fantasy hockey season and everything. But are you using the one-team goalie strategy in any of your leagues right now, Mike?
I'm actually not. I'm not. But I do believe in it. But I actually am not. I think this year, a big thing for me was I took Binnington in a lot of leagues really late. And I wasn't too excited about Thomas Greiss as the backup.
That's fair.
Yeah, so I didn't really do it this year, but I did do it the last 2 years in my big league with the Colorado goalies. I was able to squeeze them out, and it was actually funny. So Georgiev got kept, and and a guy says, he like wrote in our group chat, he's like, Mike, congratulations, you're not able to run with the Colorado goalies this year, so someone's going to have a chance to win. I'm like, oh, yeah, you're right, I guess. I didn't even take Francouz in that league. I think I have Kemper, Merzlikins. That was a league I had literally no picks in. But my first year not running the one-team goalie strategy. But I do see, and I did a video today on the week 3 preview. Pittsburgh has a really weird schedule this week. They have 4 games, and they're both on back-to-backs. So I think Casey DeSmith is an extremely good player to add this week and stream. And that was actually the premise of.
I don't know if Mike froze. Mike might have just DC'd. Guys, Mike is back. Round of applause in the chat right now. Am I?
So I'll tell you what happened. No, you're good. Okay. So I went behind the net. I got pressured by the forward, and I flicked it out of play. I got sent to the penalty box. 2 minutes. Delay a game.
2-minute delay a game for Mike.
A little bit of Justin Hole action.
Okay.
I apologize.
You're good. We're just kind of touching on like the fact that DeSmith is a good option, and Data talked about it kind of in this video because of like he gets the benefit of playing with Pittsburgh in front of him and the team defense and everything. And the same reason that you would draft any other backup is because you want exposure to that team and not necessarily just the goaltender. All right, so going forward, I think we can, now that you're back in your full form and you're no longer a robot.
Not in the penalty box.
Not in the penalty box anymore. Is there any kind of hot or slow starts that you want to touch on? I think one of the teams that comes to mind is Vancouver, and I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier. But other than that, like, there's...
You know who I'm going to talk about.
Go ahead. You have the floor.
Okay. New Jersey Devils.
All right.
So
this is a good pivot. I like.
So I'm not going to give the individual who has been calling out the Jack Hughes bust after game 2. I'm not going to give him the spotlight here. But this Devils team they've been extremely good early on. And I have the numbers up here, so I'm going to be reading from my screen on the left and talking to you on the right. So they have 5 games played. They have a 61% Corsi for percentage, meaning when they are on the ice, 61% of these shots are going to the opposing nets. So 353 Corsi for, 225 against. Just simplifying a little bit, shots for. 196 shots for, 106 shots against. Now their goals for is where it becomes a problem. So in terms of goals for, they only have 14 goals for, and they are expected 21. So they're -7 goals for right now, which means they're getting pretty unlucky. Scoring chances for, they are first in the league at 63%. Where is high danger chances? It should be right here. High danger chances for. They are first in the league at 70%. 85 high danger chances for, 37 against. They are 7% higher than number 2, which is the Boston Bruins. Now, this is very early, very preliminary, but they have been very, very good early on. And something we talked about with Mackenzie Blackwood, where you were like, oh, he's only an 880 save percentage. I'm like, well, he has a 237 goals against average because he's not facing any volume, but he's also not letting any goals. And last night against San Jose, don't have the numbers up right now. I could probably pull it up, but I think it was 39 shots to 20 in that game last night. And Blackwood let up 1 goal. Hughes again left off the board. But I mean, I'm not panicking about Hughes. I'm looking right now. He is 10th in the league for time on ice per game at 21 minutes and 27 seconds for forwards. And I mean, his on ice stats have just been absurd. Let me pull them up right now. Do you have Hughes in any leagues?
I traded for him. Like I said, I moved Aho.
Yeah,
I have
we talked
him.
about that.
I have him in our keeper league, the one that we're both in with all the guys. And the one thing I will say about New Jersey is like, and Elliot Friedman kind of talked about this in 32 Thoughts because he was like, this is obviously like a hot topic, how like the Lindy Ruff situation, the fact that like the team is doing so well from like an analytics standpoint. And he kind of like posed the question, okay, like at what point do you just say like, forget the numbers at this point? It doesn't matter. Whatever this is, it's not working.
Yeah.
And so like that's more of like an actual like NHL question, like what's going on with the coaching, what's going on with like the line shuffling maybe. And I think that, you know, like you look at a team like New Jersey and the struggles that they went through last year was through goaltending. And I think you're seeing a lot of the similar things that you're seeing this season as well, where they brought in Vanacek and they brought in guys like Palat, and they tried to kind of like have the vets, you know, kind of carry this team through adversity. And like, I just think that if they get any kind of competent goaltending, they'll start to see more results. And I think as long as they continue on this path, like the fact that Hughes is within the top 10 in terms of lowest goals above expected, which I kind of touched on earlier.
Yep. 4%
Like
shooting percentage right now.
Yeah. Like it's just, you can tell he has a smaller sample than most players, but you can tell that should change as the season progresses. Not only that, but just the rate at which he's shooting is a good indication that like, he's getting chances, right?
Yeah, he has 14 high danger chances, individual high danger chances, which means he produces it himself. He is ranked 9th in the league. He's also tied with your boy William Nylander. I mean, individual scoring chances for, he's 9th in the league, and the guys above him all have 6 and 7 games, so they all have an extra game in hand. He's just shooting, he's getting the puck to the net more than most players in the league. 14th for individual Corsi 4. Now, this is just himself, right? So he has been lighting it up. If you go type in Jack Hughes on Twitter, people are like, oh my God, Jack Hughes robbed. Oh, what a move by Jack Hughes, robbed again. It's just a matter of time before this guy breaks out. I have a friend that is a Detroit Red Wings fan, and the game that he had 7 shots on net against them, he said he was by far the most dominant player on the ice. Like, it was all Hughes. So I think we're going to see him really start to pick it up very soon. Maybe it's just me that's saying that because I'm biased, but saying that he's a bust already 2 games into the season is just clown work like, there, to be honest.
And it was never a question of his skill, right? Like the issue with him was just like we never saw the production. And then once we saw the production from him last year, like he had that injury that just like completely offset him. So like I understand why people are frustrated with him, especially when we have been hyping him up too. But you guys like have to understand, like Austin Matthews, for example, he has 1 goal in his first
it was barely a goal.
Yeah, right? He has 1 goal on his first.
You have to review it to make sure.
5-6 games, right? And if you go back and you look at Matthews last season when he scored 60 goals, in the month of October, he only had 1 goal.
Wow.
So, like, you guys have to remember that it takes time for players to gel. It takes time for players to adjust. I think New
Puck luck's
Jersey,
a big thing, man.
puck luck is a huge thing. New
I believe it.
Jersey is the beneficiary of it. You look at guys like just history will prove this to you guys. Like you look at guys like Pettersson, for example, with last year in comparison to how he's doing this year. Like he looks like a completely different player, and that's because like it's just the fact that his chances are now going in the net. Whether that's something that he's done and adjusted, or whether that's just like him regressing to his career shooting percentage. Right? Like we know guys like Matt Duchene are not going to put up 42 goals this year just because he's not like a career 40 goal guy, right?
Yeah.
So it's important to understand that, like, yes, like it's frustration because like you've spent, I'm assuming, a relatively high draft pick. I was a big beneficiary of even reaching on this guy. But, like, you got to understand that it takes time to gel. I think the Sens are a good example of that as well. Like, people were kind of really worried about, like, their start to the season and the fact that, like, they went on this huge, like, road losing streak to start off. And it just, like, it didn't look like things were gelling between them. It's just going to take time, guys, especially with teams that have a lot of new personnel, like the Devils especially.
Yeah. I think this is a good time for a ad read.
Okay.
Now,
First
I'm
ad
sure we
read.
have some... I'm sure we have some Spit and Chicklets fans, and I hope to not have Paul Bissonnette's reading ability. I don't know if you've ever seen that. It's so funny. Like that they make him just like, because he was never really like, he never really learned how to read, and it's just like stuttering, and he can't read the big words. But I don't have a full script here, but this podcast is sponsored by PrizePicks. We were lucky enough to get them as our sponsor. Using code PUCK, they will match 100% of your deposit up to $100. So if you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. It's free money. For those that enjoy sport betting, head on over there. The link will be in the description. And you're wondering, how does it work? You pick 2 to 5 players, and if they will score more or less than the PrizePick projections, you can win up to 10 times your money on any entry. So for example, if they have Jack Hughes at 2.5 goals, 2.5 shots, sorry, 2.5 goals is a little excessive.
a little out of
2.5 shots. Timo Meier at 0.5 goals. If you take the overs on both of them and they hit, you win. Simple as that. I mean, for those that sign up using code PUCK, if you want to go in the Discord, ask us our favorite picks. We will hand them out to you. We have a very extensive projection sheet that we made. So we do have our own projections that we can compare against PrizePicks to see how the picks will do. So use code PUCK, head on over to PrizePicks, deposit money. They will match up to $100, 100% of your deposit. How was that?
That
B-?
Honestly, yeah, you know what? You did a lot better of a job than I would have done. I would have just started doing some like wacky, like, Mike, do you want to win a Lamborghini? You can pick your prize with PrizePicks, except you can't win a Lamborghini. You can only win money.
Oh man, I miss playing DFS, man. I don't want to get into it though. It's a touchy subject. So I think I think this is a good time to segue into some of the viewer questions from our Discord.
I was
hop in our
just
Discord,
gonna
guys. Get in there.
Get in the Discord right now.
I love it. I love talking hockey with you
listening
guys.
to this in your car, driving on your way home from work on a Monday. Get in the Discord right now. Just don't do it while you're driving.
From Popeyes on Wednesday.
All right, we got a couple questions here, guys. Thank you so much for submitting your questions on the Discord. We're going to start things off here with Headbangers. He says, Patrick Kane trade destinations. Mike, who do you got?
It's pretty obvious. I think you're thinking the same as me right now. New York Rangers?
I could tell you the trade. Yep. I think it's... And my brother actually said this to me, and the more I thought about it, I'm like, you know what? That 100% makes sense. I think it's Capo Caco going the other way. I think it's 2 firsts and a prospect as well. And I think they reunite Kane with the Breadman, and they just go on an absolute tear with Vincent Trocheck sandwiched between them. Vincent Trocheck. Fantastic. I couldn't be happier.
If I had to guess what the trade would be, I would say Zach Jones, that defenseman they really, really like there.
Yeah.
Capo Caco and 2 firsts, and then it's going to be Kane and retained salary, right?
Yeah, I believe just with his salary especially, they're going to have to get a third team involved. Like, I think that's just a given at this point.
Arizona?
Probably. But yeah, I think Kane to the Rangers, I'd be really surprised if he went anywhere else. I don't expect it to happen until trade deadline just because like that gives him the most likely chance to land with the team that's going to be in the playoffs.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't get your hopes up too early if you're a Patrick Kane owner in fantasy, but definitely hold on to him and anticipate a trade later in the season.
2 assists today. He's finally putting up points, and I just want to say that I almost traded Rupe Hintz for him as a great buy low candidate, and the trade did not go through. He agreed to it and then backed out last minute saying, I'm not looking to rebuild just yet. So I almost snagged Patrick Kane for Rupe Hintz. I did see, so it's 5-4. Yeah, so just 2 points for him today. What are the other questions?
All right, so we have one from
So aggressive.
Zra right here. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's ZRA.
Oh, he's good in Discord.
He said sell high, buy low, which I wanted. Like, there's a bunch of buy low, sell high questions here. I want to keep those for the videos that we put out this week, just so, again, we can go into more detail instead of us just splurting out names. But I saw that he said sustainable / unsustainable, so I'm going to go through just a couple names within the top 10, and I'm going to tell you how many points that they have, and you're going to tell me whether or not it's, like, sustainable that the pace that they're on. Okay?
Okay. So this is actually a segment from the Fantasy Hockey Podcast.
Really? Is it actually?
Yeah, it's really good. Yeah, it's really good. So I don't want to steal the idea, but just because it was a question, we'll
I was thinking that I was an absolute, content genius, and I've just come up with this game on the spot.
But okay, we can do this. I like this.
All right. Tied for first in the NHL in points with 11.
Unsustainable.
Valtteri Nichushkin.
So Valerie.
Is it Valerie? Oh,
yeah, no, it's okay.
Sorry,
it's
Valerie.
Okay. So unsustainable, and my reasoning is he only played 62 games last year. He has injury history, and he has never put up more than 52 points in a season.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Unsustainable.
Criminally underrated player and notable hater by FP Mike can confirm. Currently has 10 points and is tied for third in the NHL. Sidney Crosby.
Okay. Can I say a moderate sustainable?
No, it's got to be sustainable or unsustainable. We're not sitting on the fence here.
Unsustainable, again, injury history.
Wow. I think
Gensel already is hurt.
I was going to say if he went
getting
unsustainable injury history, but the personnel around him, I think that would have made a little bit more sense. I still think Crosby is like an unbelievable player in the NHL, and I wouldn't be surprised if he scored 90 points. So I'm actually going to go with sustainable, just because he's got a chip on his shoulder this year, and it's really like Pittsburgh knows that who they have on their team now, and it's locked up. So they're just really trying to find that extra gear to get back into a deep playoff run.
Until Nikita Zadorov runs him through the boards and he hurts his shoulder and he's out for 3 months. Okay, next.
All right. And this one's kind of a little bit of I'm not going to say controversial, but like just in the sense that like it's very unexpected that he's this high given his track record for the team. Jesper Bratt tied for 10th in the NHL with 8 points.
All assists? I think they're all assists.
They're all assists. There's 7 assists in 4 games for Brad. You got unsustainable or sustainable?
I'm just thinking because the Devils team's actually been very unlucky. And he did have a good season last year. He's over a point per game, right?
Yep.
It's so hard for me to justify saying sustainable after I said Sidney Crosby is unsustainable, but I think because I like this Devils team so much, I think it is going to be sustainable, but to a certain degree. I don't think it's going to be like a 1.3 point per game pace, but I could see just like straight up 1 or a little under 1.
Okay, so my question for you is, do you think that he is over or under his previous year total where he had 73 points in 76 games?
He's going to be like really close to it, like pretty much right on. Yeah.
Okay. Because this is a big year for him because he signed that 1 year, right?
Yeah.
Where they was like, okay, it's a prove it kind of year.
And Dougie's healthy, which I like. Hughes is healthy. There's a lot to like on that team right now.
I think the big indication is that it's 7 assists and he doesn't have a goal, and we know how unlucky the Devils are just in general with their goal scoring. So I like that take actually. Okay, let's do a fun one here. Gabe Velarde tied
Oh
for
my
22nd. He has 7 points in 6 games, so a little bit more of a sample. This is still very early on, obviously, and I'm sure we can go back to this later and clip some of these, but
Yeah.
what do you think?
I'm going to say unsustainable, and I think it's because he is still playing on the third line, which is a little bit concerning, but he is on the top power play unit. He was a big prospect. I just don't think we've seen enough career-wise from Velarde, but he could honestly have a Jesper Bratt season from last year and put up 70 points and surprise people, but the Kings don't really have a lot of high point-producing players, so I think it's going to end up coming down a little bit. I think he's going to slow down.
Okay, so let me just pull.
You're going to tell me he's not in third line anymore, aren't you?
I was going to say, I don't think that line is the third line. I think that line is the second line. I think that Byfield line is the second line. And I'm just...
So Danault was the third line?
I brought up Danault's time on ice, and he's getting just shy of 16 minutes, which is relatively the same time on ice that Velarde's getting. And I know one's a center, one's not. And I just think that the way that LA is deploying those lines is it's like a 1-2. Right?
Okay.
It's not like
2A, 2B.
Yeah, it's not like Toronto, for example, where you know that second line is going to get a much larger share of ice than the third line.
David Kampf.
David Kampf isn't even on the third line now.
Wayne Simmons passed last night.
Oh, elite,
like,
elite playmaker. Okay, I'm going to transition to goals quickly, and then we'll get on to a different question. We'll do a couple here. Goals. Tied for 5th. Jonathan Marchessault. 5 goals in 5 games.
So unsustainably high, but I am a very big Marchessault fan. He is one of the highest shot volume players in the league, and he has history of scoring 30 plus. Obviously not goal per game pace it's not a thing. Like no one will get there, but I think 30, 35 is very doable for Jonathan Marchessault. So I actually drafted him in a few leagues, so I am a little biased, but our projections loved him. I think our projections had him at 270 plus shots. I don't want to pull them up right now, but
he's a very good shot volume guy for sure. And I think obviously like this is like being goal per game is like just completely unsustainable, except for maybe 1 or 2 people in the NHL, being Austin Matthews. But like I think that, like you said, going forward, like 35, even 40 goals, like I wouldn't be surprised if this guy hits 40. Number 1, because of his shot volume, and number 2, he's just seeing time with Eichel constantly. So if Eichel's going off, then Marchessault is going to be the beneficiary of that. Right?
Yep.
Okay, I'll do 1 more. I'll do 2 more actually.
One more.
Okay, 1 more.
For time's sake.
Tied for 8th in the NHL, 4 goals in 5 games. Cole Caulfield.
Sustainable.
Sustainable?
Yeah, he's a beast. He's so good.
He's actually incredible. I'm very disappointed. I don't have him in any league.
Me neither. Because I play in plus minus leagues, man. It was tough.
Well, I found that we're reaching on him as well. So if you have your hands on Cole Caulfield right now, like good for you, first of all.
Yeah, him and Suzuki.
But yeah, like just as long as he continues to see like first line minutes, like you said, like with Suzuki, like I think that guy could easily pot 30, 35 even, right?
Yeah, he was drafted for his shot. I remember seeing in the World Juniors, like it was literally the power play was Zegras, give it to Caulfield, give the puck to Caulfield, and he just, I don't know if it was against Canada, it might have been against Canada, where he had like 5 shots in one power play from the same side. He finally scored. He didn't score in World Juniors till like game 2 or 3, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Couple more questions just to finish things off here. We got T Corp. Really interested to hear your opinion on Florida, particularly Reinhart, Barkov, and Bennett.
Do you want to go? You want me to go?
You start us off. You can start us off.
So I think the only real thing I'm concerned about with Florida right now, and I'm a big believer in number 1 defenseman having a huge impact on a team's success, and that Ekblad going down with injury does worry me a little bit with that Panthers team, but they are still very, very good offensively. They're just off to a slow start right now, and they have had a couple tough matchups early on, like Tampa and the Islanders, like two very strong defensive teams with like Vezina candidate goaltenders. I think they're going to be fine. I'm not really too concerned about this Florida team, but a lot of it does rely on what's going to happen here with Ekblad and his LCIR designation. They did say it was short term, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's a good sign for sure. Reinhardt, it really depends with Reinhardt. I would like to see him back on Barkov's line. Barkov, I think, is a buy low for sure.
For sure.
And then Sam Bennett, like, yeah, he's not really producing at the rate that he was previously, but he's still getting a good amount of shot volume. He's still hitting a bunch. Like, he had 6 hits last game.
Tons of minutes.
If you have him in a bangers league, like, great. So I think if he stays with,
good.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too worried if you own those guys. Like, you just got to hold and kind of wait it out. Like, there's not much you can do right now until you get a better understanding of where that team's at from a sample standpoint.
Yeah, Bennett's minutes are up too, and with Ekblad out, he's been actually on power play 1, which is why I liked him so much going into this season. And I just want to note that their first 5 games have been against Islanders, Buffalo, Boston, Philly, and Tampa. Those are all over 500 teams, and I would say Buffalo's not very good defensively, but like Comrie's been a beast. Hart's been really good.
Mm-hmm.
Those are all really tough matchups. Although they should be, playing good in these good matchups. I think once their schedule eases out a little bit, they'll be fine. But Bennett's been playing a ton of minutes, man. Holy 20, 19, 46, 19, 17, 30, and 18, 30. Like, that's a lot of minutes from last year. Last year he was at almost 17. So,
all right, two more questions.
Yep.
Opinion on Kuzmenko. And I'll start this one off. He's got 2 points right now. Vancouver is just struggling as a whole. I think the biggest thing with Kuzmenko is, like, hopefully you guys draft him later on in your drafts rather than earlier. He's still shooting the puck. Like, he's got 19 shots on goal through 6 games, which is still like a decent amount of volume. The production's obviously not there. That's just because Vancouver is going through it right now. The biggest indicator with me is as long as he's seeing over like that 16, 17 minute mark for time on ice, like, I still think he's worth hanging on to, because I think that team's hopefully going to figure it out, at least from the scoring standpoint. And if he continues to see power play 1 time, like, that's just my biggest 2 check marks with him, just because I drafted him so late. I really didn't have this huge expectation. We knew it was possible that he could end up being not like the caliber of, say, Kaprizov, for example, right? Like, we knew this. Like, he could have been a Gusev, and we didn't know up until he started playing.
Nikita. So, Andrei Kuzmenko. And this caught my eye while we were on this recording. Individual goals for, all strengths. Where does he rank?
On his team or in the NHL?
In the NHL, amongst forwards.
Individual goals for?
Individual expected goals.
Okay, expected goals. I'm going to say, like, I haven't watched a lot of Canucks, but I'm going to say, like, in the top, like, 20% of the league. He
is rank 8.
Wow. I didn't think he'd be top 10, if I'm honest.
Yeah.
Like,
It
50.
It really surprised me. Individual high danger chances for. Where does he rank?
Top 10 again?
Third. So he is producing chances. He just has not found the back of the net. Now, again, this is more of a human factor, I think, more than a numbers factor, because it must be so hard, and we'll never know, really, for a player to come over to North America from Russia, not speak the language. There's a lot of controversy with Russian athletes right now. Mm-hmm. And I feel like there was a lot of hype. Like, I remember reading on Twitter, and the word they were using for Kuzmenko was the sweepstakes. Like, that's the word they were using with Shohei Ohtani in baseball. Like, I
remember them using that for, like, oh God, what's the American? He was like VC. Yes.
My God, don't get me started with that guy. He was like holding out like he was going to be the next big thing.
Yeah, I remember the Leafs were in on him. We were like, oh, I really hope we get this guy.
I think he was Harvard.
Some D1 school.
But yeah, anyways, so I don't think there's much to worry about with Kuzmenko, and you touched on it perfectly, where you probably drafted him like close to your last pick. I took him as my rookie in the league that we're in together as one of my last picks. I wouldn't worry. I think in 12-team leagues, like you could drop them because there's a lot of good wingers available, like Raquel and DeBrusque, Jarvis. But in 14 plus team leagues, like you got to hold this guy, no question. Again, this entire Vancouver team is trending down right now, and once they bounce out of it, they're going to be good.
Okay, last kind of final thank you to Salty for asking that question as well. Last kind of topic that we haven't covered that was suggested, and you can kind of like maybe give like one or two for each of these, but biggest draft regrets and biggest big brain moves.
Oh man, I got to think about this right now. Do you have yours prepared?
I don't have mine prepared, but I can give one off the top of my head, and it's just pertaining to my keeper league a little bit. So the strategy that I went with, just because I picked so deep in the draft, like I didn't have a lot of draft picks early on or anything like that, my biggest regret is like selling too much last year.
Yeah.
And in keeper leagues, if you're trying to be competitive, which like I decided early on last year that next year I was just like foregoing it completely. I'm just going to full rebuild, blah, 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 blah. I'll spend as much as I need to try and win. But the moves that I were making, like they were just very much like in the moment, who is good right now moves. And I wish that I took more time towards the latter half of the season to kind of pick players that I could bring into the following season as keepers or have to then sell for assets going forward. So just a little bit more like you have to be conscious of like who's hot in the NHL, but also like you should always be forward thinking beyond just the season that you're in. If you're in a keeper league, obviously.
No question.
Right?
That's actually a really good one. And it kind of sets me up a little bit. Like I had the exact same problem where I traded for Barkov and Kemper last year. I traded a couple picks because Kemper was on Colorado. I wanted the two goalies on Colorado. Mm-hmm. And I sold the farm and I didn't win. And going into this season, and I would say my biggest draft day mistake in my biggest league is that I didn't have the goaltending going into this year. It was so the way our keeper league works is it's 2 forwards, 1 D, 1 goalie. 12 team leagues, which means, you know, all the top goalies are being kept. It's really hard to have a good goalie in that league. And I knew Kemper was on a 1-year deal, but I still traded for him and he didn't sign with Colorado. And now I'm sitting here with a terrible Washington Capitals team with their starting goalie that hasn't been doing well for me. So, and I struggled in the draft, man. Oh my God. I'm like, when do I pick? When is my pick coming up? But I had a lot of good sleeper picks, and that would be my big brain play is I knew this league, I can get some really deep players. Raquel, Toffoli, my boy, Arturi Lehkonen, Montour, Jarvis. I knew I could snag these guys really late. So I think my big brain play is that although I sold the farm, I knew I would be able to have a strong draft because of how well we do with identifying sleepers really late.
So I think my biggest brain move or moves, just to classify, is just given the circumstance, and I'll use the same league as the example, because I didn't have a lot of high-end draft picks, I knew not only like where, because we've done so much preparation and so many mock drafts and so many, like you kind of touched on, like you know where the sleepers are and when you can take them. My biggest brain move was in the latter half of my draft, I just made it apparent that I was drafting based off of ceiling. And so like I would take shots at guys like Nietzsche's, Kalen Addison was one of my latter picks, Jake Sanderson, who I knew was like somebody that just had a lot of controversy because like people didn't think like he was going to be that relevant. I would draft players that regardless of whether they were hurt, like Jacob Chikrin, for example, I think that's going to blossom into something as he potentially gets moved later on. Going after guys that I think like, okay, like this guy could be a coin flip, but if he hits, then he's going to be great. Like Carter Hart, I was able to grab off waivers. Charlie McAvoy is an example. Guys like Dylan Holloway, who like, and again, they don't all hit, but that's why you like throw darts at the dartboard, because
really late, yeah.
The way that I was drafting was like, I don't need everybody to hit. I just need one, or I just need two.
Yeah,
so I was just purely going based off of potential. So
that's a good way to put it.
That's kind of how I approach the latter half of my draft, because especially in keeper leagues, when you have guys that you know what you're getting out of them. Like, I know I'm getting 260, 270 shots from Roman Josi this year, right? Like, I know I'm able to trade away John Tavares and Adam Fox because of their good quality players for draft pick next year to better improve my team and potentially get a better player.
I know that I'm able to in a couple leagues.
Dude, Josi might just be like collectively our favorite player just amongst like the two of. I know Don loves him too, and like what's not to love, but even
he's
guys
in the
like
league in literally everything. Like in every advanced shooting stat, it's Roman Josi and David Pastrnak.
Yeah, and like Matt Barzell too, who I was like, okay, like this guy could have a really good year. This guy could get moved at the end of the season with his contract. Like, we don't know what's going to happen, right? So you kind of got to put the numbers aside for a second. Well, he signed the contract, right? And the draft happened before he signed the contract, so it's like you didn't know, but they don't always hit, which is, part of fantasy hockey, right?
Yep.
Like Alexander Holtz, like we were both super high. I'm like, this guy's going to play with Hughes. He's going to go off. Guy was a healthy scratch for 2 games in a row.
Jack Quinn, same thing.
Jack Quinn, same thing. Yeah. Some guy dropped Owen Power in my league. I immediately picked him up.
Yeah. This is a good way to end it now is, guys, when other managers in your league drop players that are 90+% owned across all leagues, please add them, no matter how much they're struggling. And I have 3 guys that I've added at 90+% ownership that were dropped: Matt Duchene, Jordan Kyrou, Shea Theodore. Do not panic on those guys. Yep. Guess who Jordan Kyrou was dropped for? You'll never guess. But take a stab in the dark.
What's his percentage owned?
It's probably less than 5.
Less than 5. I'm going to say.
Here's a hint.
Nick Robertson.
Okay. Oh, I actually thought you were getting it. Nick Ritchie.
Oh, what?
He dropped Jordan Kyrou for Nick Ritchie in one of my leagues.
Guys, Nick Ritchie will never score this many goals in this short amount of time ever again in his life.
Yeah.
Like, please be conscious of that. Like, just because you see a guy at the top of the scoring category and his name is, I had one earlier. Like, I don't know I think I like Alex Tuck, but I don't think he's going to be a goal per game guy. I
actually dropped him.
I like him a lot, but like, he's not a goal per game guy. He's not somebody that I'm dropping Kevin Fiala for, right?
No.
Like, it's not. Like, who else is up here that shouldn't be? Like, Nichushkin, he's got 6 goals. Konechny has 4 goals. Like, I'm not dropping an elite player that I spent like a 4th-round draft pick on.
Exactly.
To pick up Travis Konechny.
Yeah. And another thing, too, when assessing a trade, remember
Use our trade analyzer.
Use the trade analyzer. Quick plug.
Use the trade analyzer.
Just remember where you drafted that player and who you're getting back. So if you take someone in the 3rd round and you get offered someone like Jesper Bratt, who was taken in the 12th round, do not trade your 3rd round pick away. You drafted him in the 3rd round for a reason. He was projected there for a reason. Do not panic. And if you feel like you're panicking, go in the Discord, tag @FP Mike and say, should I make this trade? Or just comment on the video. We will help you guys get through this entire
what FP
season.
Mike says, and then @FP Chris and ask me what I would do, because I'm never wrong.
and that is how we're going to conclude today's podcast.
Thank you so much. I even stole the ending from Mike. That's fine. Thank you so much for listening to us. Again, we have player projections. We have trade analyzer available on our Patreon. Guys, go follow us on Twitter as well. Just the support on YouTube and Twitter recently has just been incredible. So Thank you guys so much. Be sure to follow us on Twitter for all the fantasy hockey updates, lineup updates, player updates, injuries, all that good stuff. And we've got a lot of good content coming for you guys this week, including our buy low and our sell high, which will be very popular videos, I'm assuming, based off of how many questions we've got. Guys, it's still very early in the fantasy hockey season. Remember, don't panic. Hold on to your players. And join the Discord if you guys haven't already. If you guys have any questions or anything, let us know. Guys, thank you so much for watching and or listening to this podcast. We will see you in the next episode.